Jade Taylor was 23. She was in her final year of college, learning to walk that delicate line between dreams and reality. Each morning, the first thing she saw when she opened her eyes was always the same: Mochi curled up in her little cat bed by the window, sleeping peacefully. Mochi wasn't just a pet, he was the keeper of her quiet nights, the soft tongue that licked away her tears, and the warm presence that rested his head on her lap to lull her to sleep during finals week. Mochi was the only source of unconditional love in Jade's life, and on her birthday, Jade hadn't asked for any gift besides him, because she didn't need anyone else. The first notification on her phone that birthday morning was from her mother. When Jade rubbed her eyes and opened the screen, she'd expected a smile, but instead the message landed like a punch in the gut. I have sold your cat. Your sister needs a new iPhone. Be grateful. For a moment, Jade understood nothing. Her eyes read the message, but her brain refused to register its meaning. She read it again, twice, then 3 times. Finally, she set the phone aside. Her heart pounded, but it felt as though the air had been sucked out of the room. The silence in her bedroom swelled, echoing like a scream. She leapt out of bed and ran to where Mochi should have been. But the bed was empty. The cat bed was still warm, but there was nothing in it. No note, no sign, no sound. It was as if Mochi had never existed. Tears filled Jade's eyes. In a panic, she threw open the door, sprinted to the kitchen, and checked every room. She found the carrier she'd painted with her own hands, but it was gone. She crumpled to the floor, her breathing ragged. She brought her hands to her head and reopened her mother's message. The tone, the lack of punctuation, the forcefulness, it all felt so familiar. This wasn't the first time her mother had done something like this, but it had never been this cruel. Jade's younger sister, Chloe, was 16, the family's golden child. She got whatever she wanted, spoke however she pleased, and never faced any consequences. And now she needed a new phone, so their mother's solution was to sell Jade's cat. Be grateful. That one word exploded inside Jade like a bomb. It felt like the one word that had suppressed every voice she'd ever had. Be grateful. Since childhood, everything had been stifled with that same demand. Torn shoes? Be grateful. Forgotten on your birthday? Be grateful. While everything was done for Chloe, you got pushed aside? Be grateful. But this time was different. Something inside Jade broke, not her heart, not even the glass of her resolve, but her patience with herself. On that morning, Jade did not stay silent. She wiped away her tears, opened the Notes app on her phone, and typed her first sentence. Today is my birthday, and for the first time, I refuse to forget who I am. Tears still pounded behind her eyes, but crying wouldn't undo what had happened. Every corner of her room felt hollow, as if a spirit had been ripped away, but what wounded her the most wasn't loss, it was betrayal. Pumpkin. That was her little orange cat's real name. Mochi had been his nickname. She'd named him Pumpkin because of his yellow-orange fur and slightly lazy demeanor. And yes, Pumpkin wasn't just a cat to her. He had entered her life at the very end of its darkest year. When Jade was 20, she fell into her first major depression, so deep it nearly made her drop out of college. For days, she wouldn't leave her room, wouldn't eat, wouldn't even look in the mirror. Then one morning, on the edge of campus, she wandered into a small veterinary clinic. There, behind a glass window, was a tiny kitten trembling in a box. He had no mother, and no one else was looking for him. If he survived, it would be sheer luck. When she held that tiny kitten in her arms, it was as if a small light had flickered on in the darkness inside her. Pumpkin was the single reason she found a thread of connection to life. Whenever her traumas felt too heavy to carry, Pumpkin would come and curl up on her chest. When she cried, he purred softly. He was the language of silence. When she couldn't scream, he'd breathe in her stead. And now, that being was gone, taken without warning, without notice, without feeling, taken by her own mother on her birthday of all days. Jade grabbed her phone again, ready to text back, but the screen remained silent. Her mother, still there in black and white text, but no explanation, no apology, not even a crumb of a why. Just that first message: I sold your cat. Your sister is getting a new iPhone. Be grateful. Sell. You can sell a coat, a house, a pair of shoes. But a life? The anger that Jade had buried for years began to crystallize into a stubborn determination. Pumpkin was her gift, a donation so meaningful that no words could capture how he'd saved her. And now, that gift had been sold as though he were nothing. Sitting on the edge of her bed, Jade traced her fingers where Pumpkin used to sleep. There were still a few tufts of fur clinging to the bed. He'd left behind tiny, fragile strands. But Jade knew this. Some losses aren't physical. They're the collapse of a soul. She opened her notebook and wrote another line. Pumpkin was not just a cat. He was the proof that I could survive. And now, they have sold away what kept me alive. But another voice rose inside her, and this time I will not stay silent. From the outside, the building where Jade lived looked like any other suburban home. A neat lawn, a well-kept fence, faux flowers in the window boxes. But inside, something had been missing for years, a sense of belonging. Jade had grown up in that house, under the same roof, but she had never once felt at home. It was never her place, never somewhere she held any real value. It was just somewhere she could stay, temporary, cold, conditional. Her mother's voice ruled the house. She spoke loudly, commanded at will, and love came with strings attached. And Chloe, Jade's little sister, 16, falling asleep in full makeup, more interested in TikTok than school, but always the golden kid. Decisions in the house never involved Jade. What curtains would go in the kitchen, which soap in the bathroom, which TV show played in the living room, everything revolved around Chloe's preferences, and their mother accepted it all as gospel. Even though Jade was in college, she couldn't freely decorate her own bedroom. Whenever she asked for a bookshelf, she was told, "Your room's already a mess." When she wanted quiet to study, Chloe would blast music, and their mother would shrug and say, "Your sister's a kid, let her have some fun." But this wasn't just about physical space, it was about how Jade's very character was systematically erased from that house. Pumpkin was even outside of that equation. When she made her first real decision, taking on the responsibility of another living creature, they'd taken him from her. Sometimes Jade would sit in her room and listen from a distance to the conversations in other parts of the house, the laughter, the plans, the gifts bought for Chloe. Her name never came up. Her birthday was usually remembered at the last minute. Once, her mother even said, "You're just too emotional, Jade. You take everything personally." Chloe is a stronger personality, so she gets more support and understanding. Support, understanding. Those words for Jade sounded like myths. In that house, love was never offered to her unconditionally. That's why Pumpkin had been her only sanctuary, and now even he was gone. One evening, as Jade passed through the living room, she saw Chloe posing for a new phone ad, smiling with her new iPhone, while their mother recorded her. Jade moved past them like a ghost, unseen, unheard, unacknowledged. But inside her mind, a voice roared louder than ever. "I never had a place in this house, but one day I will walk out of this place on my own terms." That evening, she wrote in her notebook, "A home isn't built with walls, it's built with value. And I've never found that value here." Birthdays. For some people, they mean cake layered with candles, surprise gifts, and arms wrapped around you in love. But for Jade, birthdays were just a reminder you can be forgotten. When she woke that morning, she expected nothing. She was grown now. She'd long since given up on colorful gift boxes, balloons, or someone hugging her tight. But still, everyone wants to hear at least a happy birthday, to know you exist in someone's eyes. She walked into the kitchen to find her mother making coffee, and Chloe sprawled on the couch, engrossed in her phone. When Jade stepped inside, not a single glance, not a single smile. She sat quietly and poured herself a cup of tea. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Her mother jumped up, excited. "Oh, here it comes," she exclaimed. Chloe sprang off the couch, but Jade didn't move from her seat. When the door opened, a courier held out a white box with Chloe Taylor written in handwriting across the top. The gleam of the Apple logo was like a promise. Her mother grabbed the package and handed it to Chloe, her eyes shining. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," she said. Chloe squealed as she ripped it open, everyone in the room smiling, everyone except Jade, because today was Jade's birthday. But the celebration was for Chloe. There was no party table, no cake, no candle, nothing. Just that iPhone box and the laughter swirling around it. Jade sat in that room staring. No one looked at her. No one said, "Today's your day." Her mother held up the new phone and kissed it before giving it to Chloe. "You deserve the best of everything," she said. Those words felt like a twist in Jade's chest because she had been silent for years, broken but never letting on, ignored but keeping it all inside. But that day, in that living room, something inside her snapped quietly. With people laughing around her, her inner world was dying, and the worst part was that nobody noticed, because nobody even cared enough to acknowledge that she existed. Jade set her tea down on the table, stood up, and walked out, unlooked at. That night, instead of writing a question in her notebook, she wrote a decision. "I have been ignored in this house. Today was not the day I was born, it was the day I was erased. But one day, the voice they silenced will be heard by everyone." Later that night, the house was empty. Chloe was posting another story with her new iPhone. Their mother had retreated to her room. No birthday celebration, no well wishes, no "today is your day, Jade." But to Jade, the night was just beginning. Her room was half dark. She didn't even turn on the light. She crossed the floor and sat on the edge of her bed, head bowed, staring at her toes. Then tears welled up and overflowed. All the pain that had built up inside her over this one day, every stifled word, every year of being ignored, erupted in a torrent of tears. The tears she'd held back for years poured out, mingling with Pumpkin's absent breath. She grabbed a blanket from the edge of the bed, a small pale-colored throw covered in fur. It was Pumpkin's favorite. Whenever she was exhausted, Pumpkin would burrow under that blanket and purr. Now, all that was left were strands of fur and a faint scent. But to Jade, that piece of fabric was still a soul, not just remnants of life. It was the continuation of a bond. She wrapped herself in the blanket, buried her face in it, and cried in deep, silent waves. Her sobs carried the weight of a lifetime, growing up without a dad, watching Chloe always favored, and feeling her mother find her always lacking, always wrong. But beneath that weeping was something else, an awakening. Eventually, the tears subsided, replaced by a cold clarity. Jade shook the blanket off her knees and slowly stood up. She opened her closet. At the very bottom, she pulled out an old backpack. It wasn't luggage, not a suitcase, and not a plan for escape. It was her launch. She packed a few essential clothes, a notebook, Pumpkin's empty food bowl, keeping the scent, and cut out a small piece of that beloved blanket. She folded it carefully and placed it in her bag. Everything happened in silence, but inside Jade, a storm had shifted direction. Now her silence was no weakness but preparation. That night, she wrote in her notebook, "They broke me today. Tomorrow I will make a road from those broken pieces." She didn't sleep. She just sat by the window listening to herself. And when morning came, it wouldn't be the same Jade leaving. It would be someone new arriving. As dawn's first light filtered through the window, Jade had already made her decision. The sky was gray, but there was a strange brightness inside her. This time, her departure wouldn't be silent, but simple, bare, and unforgettable. She slung her backpack over her shoulder, tucked the scrap of blanket against her wallet, and took one last look around her room. The books on the shelves, the t-shirts peeking out of her closet, the old photograph on the wall, they all failed to halt her. She'd been silent here for so long, swallowing so much, and from that silence, so many wounds had formed. But now, Jade would not remain quiet. She would write. She walked past the still silent kitchen. Her mother was asleep, Chloe probably still cuddling her new iPhone under the covers. In the center of the kitchen table lay a small slip of paper and a pen. With steady firmness, she wrote, "Thank you for selling me on my birthday." She signed nothing, explained nothing, because that sentence said everything that needed to be said. It wasn't a goodbye, it was a confrontation. She left the note in the middle of the table, placed Pumpkin's empty food bowl on top, empty but deeply meaningful, and walked to the front door without looking back, because there was nothing left behind to look at. Stepping outside into the morning chill, the air brushed her face, but she no longer felt the sting of it. That fire had burned itself out overnight. Now she walked across the ashes. On the street, she pulled her notebook from her bag, and as she walked, wrote one more sentence. I am not just walking away from a house. I am going to claim what was never given to me. The first step she took marked the beginning of something new. To many silent girls like her, this was their first step, and now, their story as well. Jade walked away from her old home with steady, determined steps. She had neither much money in her pocket nor a plan in her mind, but she knew she would never go back. This time, she thought, not, where will I go, but where will I disappear? The city was waking up. Lights flickered on in cafes. A street sweeper gathered trash on the sidewalk. But inside Jade's head, it was still dark. As she walked, she thought only of one question. Who would accept me just for existing? No questions asked? And one name came to her, Camille. In their first year of college, they had been roommates. Though they came from different backgrounds and had different habits, Camille had accepted Jade exactly as she was. She never asked, never forced, but was always there, especially on Jade's quiet nights and during the sobs in the morning that nobody noticed. A year later, Camille had moved to another department in a different neighborhood and started living on her own, but Jade never forgot the warmth of that connection. Jade pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she typed a message. Camille, even if I can stay just one night, may I come over? 3 minutes later, the reply came. I didn't lock the door. The blanket is next to the shoe rack. If you want to talk, we can talk. If you don't, I'll brew tea. What happened this time? Jade's throat tightened and she wrote nothing. She simply walked onward. When she arrived at Camille's apartment, the sun had not yet risen. The door was indeed unlocked. Next to the shoe rack lay a neatly folded blanket and a lavender-scented pillow. Camille stood in the living room doorway, her hair a mess, wearing an old t-shirt. In her eyes, there was no worry, just understanding. What happened this time? She asked softly again. Jade couldn't answer. She just remained standing. She tried to speak, but her lips trembled. Camille reached out, wordlessly embraced her, and at that moment, Jade shattered again, but this time she was not alone. They moved into the living room in silence. Camille went to brew tea. Jade wrapped the blanket around herself and rested her head on the pillow. For the first time, she felt what it truly meant to be home. That night, she wrote in her notebook, sometimes no one understands you, but someone stands by you anyway, whether you speak or not, and you feel forever indebted to that person. When Jade woke on the couch in Camille's apartment, it was nearly noon. Her eyes were still puffy, her head heavy, but that night's crying was different, clean, purifying. She silently got up, straightened the blanket, and followed the smell of coffee. In the kitchen, Camille was lining up coffee cups on the counter, a soft jazz melody playing on the radio. I'm glad you woke up, Camille said. I'm glad I'm still here, Jade replied. There was no judgment in Camille's smile, just curiosity, patient but insistent. Just then, the door opened, and a tall man in a tracksuit jacket stepped in. It's not my fault your coffee is this famous, he teased as he walked to the kitchen. Camille rolled her eyes. Jade, this is my brother Drew. He talks a lot, but he means well. Drew nodded politely. Nice to meet you. Want coffee or still in runaway mode? Jade was surprised then, for the first time, allowed herself a small smile. Maybe some coffee and a plan. Camille and Drew exchanged a glance, and Drew sat down on a chair. Listen, Jade, sometimes you think you take everything in stride because you share blood with your family, but the more they push you down, the smaller you get. Living small is not the same as breathing. Camille nodded. I don't know your whole story, Jade, but someone who comes in tears has already said everything they need to in their silence. Now that you've stopped crying, it means it's time to make decisions. Jade cradled her coffee in her hands. The warmth seeped into her bones and into her heart. I don't have any plan, she said quietly. Drew gave a soft chuckle. That's exactly why it's the best time to start. Everything's possible. Camille grew more serious. If you want, you can stay here for a while, but let this be more than just a place to flee. Let it be your first step. Think about what job you want, what city you want to live in, who you want to be, because now that you've left that house, you can build a home for yourself. In that moment, something rose within Jade. Not a thought, but a pulse, an intention. She felt, for the first time, what it meant to be supported not out of pity, but out of genuine belief. And with the warmth of that coffee cup in her hands, something sparked a plan. Small, but real. That night she wrote, I don't want merely to survive. I want to learn how to live. And this time, on a road of my own making. On that third morning at Camille's apartment, Jade sat at the little table with her notebook, pen poised and a fresh cup of coffee. But this time, she wasn't writing feelings. She was writing numbers. Questions swirled in her mind. Where should I start? Where can I move? How will I get by until I find a job? Every question boiled down to one answer: money. Her family had never offered her any financial support. While Chloe got the latest phones, Jade had always been told, You're grown, do what you have to do. But Jade had responded to that silence with systems. Years ago, on the day she received her first scholarship, she made a decision. Any money she didn't spend would go into a savings account. She even got a bank card without her mother's knowledge. Her own secret escape fund. It was her one guarantee. She never touched that money. It was small, yes, but it held hope. And now, that hope was on the verge of becoming reality. That day, she went to the bank and checked her account. When she saw the balance, she swallowed hard. The total, $1,642. Tears filled her eyes, because that number, more than money, was a reminder. You're not forgotten by yourself. When Camille saw her expression, she came over and asked softly, Is that too little? Jade shook her head. Not a lot, but not zero. That evening at dinner, Drew spoke up. Life does not start from zero. It starts the moment you touch your own money. He smiled. $1,642 is a good revolutionary budget to begin. Jade laughed, really laughed. For the first time, she felt that a number didn't weigh her down, but freed her. It might not rescue her entirely, but it could set her in motion. That night, Camille gave her a small desktop file box. Write your plans. Which city do you want to live in? Which jobs will you apply for? This box will hold not just your financial records, but your future. Jade opened a fresh page in her notebook. This time, her lines were filled not with familiar sorrows, but with a firm resolve. Her first sentence read, It's not the amount of money, but what you're saving it for that determines your freedom. I saved this money not to run away, but to be reborn. Amid the whirlwind of new plans, she realized there was still something missing. Pumpkin. Pumpkin was more than a cat. He was a bond, a fragment of life, the only piece of life that belonged to Jade. She couldn't start a new life while leaving him behind, so she made a decision. She would find him. She reread her mother's message. I sold your cat. Your sister's getting a new iPhone. Be grateful. Those words still burned, but instead of sorrow, they sharpened her focus. Jade checked the timestamp of the message and estimated within what time frame that morning Pumpkin could have been dropped off somewhere. Then she searched Google for local pet stores. 3 candidates popped up. At the first shop, an elderly man behind the counter told her politely, We didn't get any cats today. The young woman at the second shop barely looked up, dispassionately saying, An orange cat? No, we haven't had one. The third stop was a barely noticeable place on a side street, Paw and Feather Pet House, its window announcing Second Chance Animals. Jade opened the door and was greeted by a middle-aged woman in glasses, friendly yet weary. Can I help you? The woman asked. Jade caught her breath. My mother, she might have dropped off a cat here this morning. Orange, named Pumpkin, a male, about 3 years old. He has a slight kink at the tip of his tail, a birth defect. The woman's expression shifted as though she recalled something, but the memory held no promise. She said slowly, Yes, I remember a cat being brought in. He was so calm, such a quiet boy. But I'm sorry, the day he arrived, someone came in and adopted him. Jade's heart raced. Who was it? Where is he? Can't you tell me? The woman shook her head. They left their ID info, but if they gave us a privacy agreement, I can't share it. That's the rule. Jade's knees weakened. Pumpkin was somewhere, a wall away, even if only for a day. And now, he was gone again. Seeing Jade's collapse, the woman softened. I can try looking into it. Maybe they gave permission to be contacted. If you come back tomorrow, I might know more. Jade nodded, thanked her, and stepped outside. The air had grown cold, but Jade held herself together. Pumpkin was now in someone else's hands. But Jade was not the broken silence girl anymore. This time she would fight to bring him back. That night she wrote, I've lost the thing that kept me alive, but now I will search with my own hands, because for the first time, I truly want something back. As she navigated these losses, Jade realized she needed another kind of support, a way to stand on her feet, literally and financially, at month's end. Even though she felt safe at Camille's, she knew it wasn't permanent. She didn't want to live off that kindness. She wanted to give back, to earn her keep. One evening, Drew found her in the kitchen and asked, Do you really want to work, or is it just because you feel you owe? Without hesitation, Jade looked up and answered, If I don't work, freedom will remain a dream. A few days later, Drew suggested a small but busy cafe in their neighborhood. They need a night shift barista. It's tough, but it's honest work. Jade applied and was hired the next day. The first time she stepped under the cafe's warm yellow lights, she felt a strange pride. Customers came and went, dishes piled up, orders got mixed. Her hands cracked, her back ached, her feet swelled. But she was meeting herself for the first time. At the end of each shift, she was tired but not defeated. The night she held her first paycheck in her hands, those crisp bills gave her not just survival, but identity. And the best part, late each night, near closing time, someone would sit on the bench across the street. Drew. He'd pretend to scroll on his phone, but he'd stay there until Jade came out. He never said much, but his presence made Jade walk home, each night feeling as though someone truly had her back. One evening after her shift, she joined him on the bench. She tossed her sweaty hair back and took a sip of water. Nothing is easy, she said. Drew turned to her. If it were easy, it wouldn't be valuable. Under the street lamp's glow, a moment of silence passed, yet that silence felt like a light, because now her life was more than something happening to her. It was something she was building. That night, she wrote in her notebook, Every night I come home exhausted, but this exhaustion smothers the years they ignored me. For the first time, I hear the sound of my own footsteps. After a night shift at the cafe, Jade would come home and collapse onto her bed, no energy to even brew tea. Her muscles ached, but there was a curious peace inside her. For each new day, she was on a path of her own choosing. She was tired, yes, but not regretful. She picked up her phone, turned off silent mode, and noticed a few notifications, none important. Her fingers almost automatically launched the social media app. Then, with no hesitation, she tapped on Chloe's account. Jade had never blocked her, because now she wasn't running. She simply kept her distance. When Chloe's profile opened, Jade's eyes fell on the latest post, just a few hours old. There was Chloe, curly-lipped in her classic selfie pose, clutching an orange cat in her lap. The filter made Chloe's glasses bigger, her pout more exaggerated. But all Jade noticed was one thing, Pumpkin. The color of his fur, the tiny kink at his tail's tip, the faint scar near his eye, all exactly the same. The caption read, My new kitty, only thing cuter than me is us together, LOL. You're my cat mom, you're my pumpkin, love. You don't gift it. A lump formed in Jade's throat, and her vision froze, her heart. It did not break this time, it hardened. Her mother had lied. Pumpkin hadn't been sold. He'd been handed to Chloe as a birthday present. Jade gripped her phone and held it, not sure at first what wave was rising inside her. It wasn't anger, and it wasn't jealousy. It was a sense of justice, and that wave could not be held down any longer. She flicked her phone's screen off, took a deep breath, but silence didn't soothe her. It propelled her into action because Pumpkin was still alive, and he might remember her. her voice, that blanket, that trust. At that moment, Camille came in with 2 cups of tea. "Everything okay?" she asked. Jade lifted her head, her eyes welling with tears that were not sorrow but steely resolve. "I found Pumpkin," she said. Camille said nothing, simply handed her a cup. "And now?" Camille asked softly. Jade took the tea in her hands, inhaled deeply, and whispered, "I'm coming to take him back." That night, she wrote in her notebook, "Returning." All her life, Jade had stayed silent. She'd been broken but never yelled. She'd faced injustice but never fought back. They had always taught her, "You don't go against family." But now she'd learned something else. Sometimes the greatest betrayal comes from the closest people, and sometimes keeping quiet is a crime itself. That night in Camille's living room, Jade spread out a small desk with her laptop, her old phone, her notebook and pen, and a clear purpose to gather facts and build justice with her own hands. Her first task was to pull up the messages from her mother on her old phone. The message remained on the screen. "I sold your cat. Your sister is getting a new iPhone. Be grateful." That sentence was no longer an emotional blow, but evidence, a written confession of wrongdoing. Next, she opened her bank account to find the transaction record the day the iPhone was purchased for Chloe. In the statement, a transfer from her mother's card was labeled "for birthday gift." Finally, she recalled the adoption paperwork from the shelter where she'd first gotten Pumpkin. The previous owner section had been left blank. But when she'd taken Pumpkin to the vet regularly, she had saved all his official pet ID documents. Those original papers were still in her wallet, proving ownership. These 3 documents, the message, the bank statement, and the adoption papers, when brought together, spoke one truth. Pumpkin belonged to Jade, and he had been stolen from her. But Jade's plan wasn't about vengeance, it was about exposing the truth. She understood that the most potent revenge was to lay the facts bare, sharp as a blade. Camille came by and looked over the documents. "The altogether is incredibly powerful," she said. "What's the plan?" Jade paused, then her eyes glowed with determination. "First, I go to the pet shop and present these papers, proving I am Pumpkin's legal owner. If they won't give me his address, I use the vet records. Pumpkin is mine, and no one can treat him like a gift again." From the doorway, Drew chimed in, "If you're going to use social media, let me know. I have the perfect line for that screenshot. Animals are not property, neither are people." Jade smiled. This battle would be won not with insults, but with evidence. That night she wrote, "I lived in silence, but now my words are weapons, my truth's a shield, and I will fight for myself." Early the next morning, Jade awoke with the sky still gray, but inside her was a brilliant clarity. Today was not a day to hide. It was a day to speak, and so many would hear her words. She sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and carefully reviewed all the documents, photos, and text she had prepared overnight. She titled her file, "A Girl, a Cat, and a Family's Silent Betrayal." She posted a screenshot of her mother's message at the top with the caption, "I received this message on my birthday. On that day, they took more than just my cat. They stole the last shred of my childhood." Below that, she embedded the image of Chloe's Instagram post, "Chloe and Pumpkin." Underneath, she wrote, "This cat saved my life. During my darkest days, I adopted him, fed him, vaccinated him, loved him. My family never understood me, but he curled up in my lap every night and stayed. And on my birthday, without my knowledge or consent, they gave him to my younger sister as a gift. Animals are not possessions, neither are people." Next, she posted a snapshot of the bank statement showing the transaction at the Apple Store in Chloe's name. Then she included Pumpkin's official documents, the vet records, his vaccine history, the adoption contract, every piece showing owner Jade Taylor. In her final lines, she wrote, "I will no longer stay silent. Not only was my cat stolen, but my dignity was taken too, and I refuse to accept that. By sharing this, each person may give voice to someone else who's been silenced, because this story is not just mine. It is the voice of thousands who have been ignored, forced to be silent under the guise of family." Jade Taylor. Her hands trembled as she hit post, But there was no fear, only anticipation. The first 5 minutes were silent, then a like, a comment. Shame on the people who did this to you. Then a share, then another. Within hours, her post was spreading. Jade's private hell had been laid before thousands, showing what had happened. Some people cried, some raged, some shared their own stories in the comments. My mom sold my dog when I was a kid, nobody cared. My siblings sold my stuff when I wasn't home. No one batted an eye. I feel like a stranger in my own home. Jade read every comment. For the first time, she felt she was not alone, and for the first time, she realized she had supported someone else's loneliness by sharing her own. Soon, volunteer groups launched a digital campaign to track Pumpkin's trail, from local shelter check-ins to adoption forums. Pumpkin's face repeated with the message, "Orange male cat with a crooked tail. Name, Pumpkin. Legal owner, Jade Taylor." These words were echoed thousands of times. When Camille showed her a news headline over coffee the next morning, "College student Jade Taylor's cat becomes symbol for millions." Jade held her cup with hands still shaking. But this was not a trembling of fear. It was a thrill of impact. "Now what?" Drew asked from the doorway. Jade looked up, calm. "I won't wait. I will accelerate my steps." Because she was now pursuing not just Pumpkin, but the rightful place her life deserved. That night she wrote, "I didn't just post a story. I opened a door, and through that door, 1,000 voices walked." It had been only 3 days since her post, but Jade's name was everywhere, on social media, in the news, even on campus bulletin boards. And, of course, in her family's living room. Her phone buzzed, revealing an incoming call from her mother. Jade hesitated to answer, but she knew she could no longer run. This was the moment for accountability. "Jade," her mother's voice thundered with that old commanding tone, but now it trembled with panic. "What have you done? You've shamed us. The whole neighborhood is talking. The aunts are texting. Chloe is crying because of you." Jade pressed the phone to her ear and closed her eyes. Then, in a calm voice, she replied, "I did nothing, Mom. I simply told the truth." "You're tearing this family apart. How could you do that? Do you know how disgraceful this is?" Jade's voice did not waver, only her eyes turned dark. "You already killed any love I had for you. I stayed silent to protect you, stayed quiet so as not to hurt you. But now I'm protecting myself, Mom." On the same day, Chloe texted her, "It wasn't nice to make me look like the enemy. People are sending hate messages to me. This is your fault." Jade read the message but wrote nothing, because some responses are louder in silence. When Camille seized Jade's phone, she simply said, "If you want, I can block her." Jade shook her head. Number let her hear it. Sometimes the truth must sting to be remembered. Later that evening at dinner, Drew said softly, "If you hadn't spoken up, they'd still think they were right. Sometimes justice breaks a family, but that crack lets light in." Jade looked up with no anger in her eyes, only clarity. "I didn't shame my family. I simply made myself visible." That night she wrote, "People hurt you most when they love you. But from that wound, if you let light in, you can grow. Now I will give my love only to those who deserve it." One morning, Camille's phone rang. The number was unknown, but the display read, "About Pumpkin." Camille held out her phone to Jade. "I think this is it." Jade's hands trembled as she picked up. A young, slightly excited but determined voice said, "Hello, I'm Mia. I don't know you, but I've been following your posts about your cat. Yesterday, I was volunteering at the shelter, and an orange male cat was brought in. He had a kink at the tip of his tail, and he was so calm. Someone dumped him on the street, and as soon as I saw him, only one name came to mind: Pumpkin." Jade felt her knees give way. She whispered, "Are you sure?" "I'm not 100% sure, but my heart tells me yes. If you want to, I have him at my place for now. Come by tonight." Jade's eyes filled with tears. She told herself, "This time I won't be late." That evening, Drew drove, Camille beside him, and Jade cradled Pumpkin's blanket in the back seat, the one he'd always slept on for years. When they arrived at Mia's apartment, Jade's hands were sweaty, and before she even reached the door, she heard a familiar sound. A meow, short, hesitant, but unmistakable. Mia opened the door. Inside, on a pillow by the window, lay a cat, orange, silent. Then he lifted his head. Their eyes met. Pumpkin. For a second, he didn't move, then he sprang to his feet and bounded over to her. He leapt into her arms, burrowed against her chest, and Jade cried. Not a cry of loss, but a cry of reclaiming. A silent celebration of a broken bond restored. Camille and Drew stood in the background, and Mia quietly smiled. No one spoke, for some moments are meant only to be felt. Jade removed the blanket, wrapped Pumpkin in it, and held him close. In that moment, no words were needed. Everything had found its place again. On the drive home, only one word was said. Welcome back. That night, she wrote in her notebook, just one line, losses sometimes return, but only if we refuse to believe they are gone. After that night with Pumpkin, Jade's world was irrevocably changed. It was not just that her cat came home, Jade's faith in herself came back too. But she still needed one thing, a place of her own, a doorstep she could claim, walls that held her in with peace, a home, not borrowed, not temporary, not watched with fear. When Jade first talked with Camille about this, they both hesitated for only a moment. They were under the same roof already, but there were still times Jade felt like a guest. Camille smiled and said, next door, but separate. Like our own homes, a two-bedroom place, small but warm. We'll split the rent, and your name goes on the lease. For the first time, a key will be yours alone. Drew helped her find the apartment, browsing online listings, walking the neighborhoods. Finally, they found a place on the top floor, bright windows, a small balcony, and the detail that captured Jade's heart, morning light streaming in. When moving day arrived, Pumpkin hopped out of his carrier on his own and wandered into the new living room. As Jade walked in, Pumpkin wriggled around her ankles, then settled at her feet. He had chosen this place as his home, just as Jade had chosen her life. The first morning in the new apartment, as Camille said, coffee or tea? Drew knocked on the door with two large takeaway cups in hand. I'm the morning shift guy, don't forget, he teased. Jade opened the door with a laugh. Now, no one was waking her with, did you wake up yet? She was the one welcome in mornings. The apartment was still bare, no furniture, empty walls, but Jade knew it was full of something else. Hope. Maybe there were no pains inside those walls yet, but there were dreams taking root. With her first paycheck, she bought a small pot and planted a tiny succulent. She named it New Beginning, and on the living room wall, she hung an empty frame. When Camille asked what it was for, she said, I'll fill it with my own photo of Pumpkin and me, smiling, both of us. That night she wrote, a home is not a place, it's walls where you no longer feel like a stranger, and I am finally in my own walls. Over the next year, Jade's life changed in ways she could have never imagined. It all started with that one message on her birthday. I sold your cat. Your sister is getting a new iPhone. Be grateful. That phrase reoriented her life, but on the same date a year later, she awoke to a very different phrase. Happy birthday, Jade. A small card lay beside her pillow, scrawled in handwriting she recognized, her mother's. Beneath that, a little sketch, Pumpkin's tiny paw print. Jade rubbed her eyes and smiled. She immediately sensed something had changed. The house was no longer silent. It was filled with hushed excitement, bursts of laughter, a bit of a commotion. She walked into the kitchen and was greeted first by the smell of coffee, then the sight of a freshly baked cake. Then, surprise! Camille stood holding a bunch of balloons, wearing goofy glasses. Drew had set up a small table in the kitchen, colorful plates, birthday candles, and a chocolate cake with Jade piped on top and, of course, a miniature figure of Pumpkin, bright orange. Tears filled Jade's eyes, but this time they were tears of the present, not the past. Drew stepped forward with a gift box in hand. We can't give you back what you lost, he said, but everything we have to give you now is yours, unconditionally, because you are you. Jade opened the box to find a delicate necklace, a tiny pendant shaped like a house, and etched in tiny letters beneath it were the words, my home, my story. Camille took her hand. This house became a home because of you, and this family is a home too. Pumpkin hopped onto a chair and started playfully tugging the tablecloth. Jade closed her eyes and thought about that moment's irony. The loneliness she'd come out of had transformed into arms full of love. They cut the cake, laughter rang out, and for the first time, Jade's birthday wasn't just a date, it was a turning point. That night, she wrote, "A year ago, a message shattered me. Today, a whisper gave me new life. Family is built not by blood, but by heart, and I'm no longer merely breathing. I'm living.